Hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us on this fair, lovely day. We've got a lot of stuff to bring you this week. Going to do a couple of important Kentucky political news items in our News of the Week section, covering some political races that are 2 years away, because why not? And then looking at what happened in the legislature today. Then we've got a couple of really amazing guests joining us this week. We're going to start with an update on the General Assembly, turning to a friend of the show, Senator Reggie Thomas, and then getting a take on what the DOGE is going on in the federal government and federal spending, and what's kind of at stake there with decisions that are happening right now in Washington, D.C. And we've got our friend Jason Bailey, the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, helping us connect the dots about what this would mean, what these decisions would mean for our fair Commonwealth. So it should be a good show. Excited to have you join us. Thanks so much for finding us. But before we jump into it, I want to make sure you're ready to help create a more compassionate Commonwealth. And we have got a fantastic opportunity for you to help us do that. So our big Andy Barr campaign, the Where's Andy campaign, the Musk or Us campaign, what is going on the federal level, and our indivisible task force that's kind of looking to put some pressure on Andy Barr. So he is actually going to be at the Commerce Lexington Policy Luncheon next Wednesday. So a week from today, as we're live. Who knows how long it'll be from you if you're listening to the podcast later or watching a replay. But we're going to be outside that luncheon demanding that he stand up to the Trump-Musk economy of, by, and for billionaires. We have got a Mobilize event, so you can find all the details and let us know you're coming. And it should be a great opportunity to really let people know that Andy Barr is running from his constituents and not doing great things for them with his votes in Washington, D.C. So if you want to do that, join us, head to the Mobilize event. If you want to make more events like that happen, please join our Indivisible Task Force. So again, federally targeted campaign actions to really put the pressure on our D.C. representatives who really aren't doing a great job of representing us. So Andy Barr is not unique in that regard. It's like, we got Morgan over in Louisville, and the rest of them are all horrible. So we need to make them pay the price. So it's really clear that if we're going to make a change there, we're going to need long-term power building to create better policies and better political outcomes in Kentucky. We really hope you'll support Progress Kentucky in our campaign to make that happen. You can do that right now. Super easy way to do it is make a contribution. Our secure online website, just Act Blue, to help turn Kentucky purple. $10, $20, $200. It all adds up to real political action. So please do join us. All right. So let's check in with our co-hosts. Want to know who you are, where you are, what are you protesting today? And if you are watching us live, let us know what you're protesting, and we can put that in the on the screen if you put it in the chat. So I'm Aaron, committee from Lexington, the lovely Childsburg community, and our sea of vinyl siding. And my sign today says it's Musk or Us, Andy Barr. That's what my sign says. Let's check in with our co-hosts. Kimberly, are you there?
I am sure enough here. How's everybody doing? I'm coming to you live from Louisville, Kentucky. My name is Kimberly Cecil Jones, and my protest sign says today, the children are screaming, "Stand up, Kentucky." I have thought about that all week long, what my protest sign was going to say. And everyone needs to realize, no matter what their party affiliation may be, they need to get back to the basics of thinking about their children, their grandchildren, and their offsprings to come. So the children are screaming, "Stand up, Kentucky."
Woo. That's dramatic. That is a dramatic one, Kimberly. Kimberly, we ever going to see your face again? Are you going to have the internet so we can actually see your smiling face?
Yes, I think I'm going to have that together. At least I'm going to try next week, and we're going to see how it rolls with this new laptop and new technology that I have. And we're going
technology day. I love it. All right, Chris, there you are. Where are you? And what are you protesting today?
Hello, everybody. I'm here in Berea, Kentucky. Don't mind the seed starting behind me. My wife is a farmer, and it is seed starting time. And my protest sign says that I can't drink sludge, which leads into one of the bills that we're going to talk about that our lovely Kentucky House has passed, but hopefully won't get passed overall. We'll see.
We shall see. We shall see. All right. Looking forward to checking in that story in news of the week. Speaking of news of the week, let's just jump into news of the week. There's so much important news to cover. We got a couple of key Kentucky stories. First, on our federal focus section, folks, Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, are they now the heroes of the resistance? The top two GOP detractors in Congress have something in common, according to Axios. They are from Kentucky. Why does that matter? Rep. Thomas Massie, Senator Mitch McConnell, and Senator Rand Paul are comfortable telling their leadership no. And two Kentucky races are drawing MAGA attention, right? So if folks recall, Trump is going after Thomas Massie. So he's vowed to get personally involved in a race to get rid of him because he was the only House Republican to vote against the Trump-backed short-term spending bill, which basically ended up being, I guess, a bipartisan bill because Massie voted against it. One Democrat voted for it. The thing passed by a very slim margin. And on that same package, Rand Paul is expected to be the only Senate Republican to vote against the short-term package later this week. And he also voted against two Trump nominees on Tuesday, which is unique. He's generally been a bit of a rubber stamp. So his relationship with Trump world, Senator Paul's relationship, that is, has deteriorated over the years. But Senator McConnell, now for the fourth time, the former GOP leader, voted against one of Trump's nominees, opposing Lori Chavez DeRemer as labor secretary, which isn't really that shocking because she's pretty, awfully moderate and pretty pro-labor for a Trump labor secretary. So that's probably why those guys voted against her, basically because she's too good for the role. But was not really shocking because McConnell has, as we've said, been the guy who's been willing to vote against Trump's nominees, and he voted against some of the worst of the worst. Also, this one, who's probably one of the best of the worst. And now Thomas Massie has decided he likes the attention, the negative attention. He's just starved for some attention, apparently. So he's now fundraising off of Trump's primary threat, with Massie saying, he's attacking me in Canada. The difference is Canada will eventually cave. Thomas Massie throwing shade on Canada, who stopped selling, I think, areas of Canada stopped selling Kentucky bourbon because of this stupid trade war. So Massie, I don't know what he's doing exactly, but a lot of Trump allies are also carefully watching the race to replace Mitch McConnell when he retires next year. And this is coming to us from the Herald Leader political newsletter. The primaries are still more than a year away, but news is happening in this space. Nate Morris, who is a Lexington entrepreneur, he was on Donald Trump Jr.'s podcast earlier this week, because that's apparently what you got to do if you want to get noticed in MAGA world. And his key takeaways from what Morris said was that Mitch McConnell's made some sickening, quote unquote, sickening decisions, and Morris is all in on MAGA. Woo! And Morris hasn't formally declared for the office. Neither has Andy Barr. But speculation about Barr's interest in running gained fuel when he was seen on camera after President Trump's address to Congress, thanking the president for taking his call. Why was he calling the president? Wonder why. Meanwhile, a new poll from a firm with ties to Dan Cameron, who is the declared candidate, shows that the former attorney general has a solid lead in a hypothetical Cameron-Barr-Morris matchup. Got to imagine that Cameron's probably better known statewide because he's run statewide before, held statewide office, whereas Barr never has. As for the Democrats, State Rep Pamela Stevenson, Colonel Pam, friend of the show, she might be getting some company on the ballot. Rocky Adkins, a former state lawmaker, current advisor to Governor Andy Barr, is being encouraged by party insiders to run for the office. Will he or won't he? I don't know, but that's interesting. That would be a very interesting wrangle. I mean, I think Colonel Pam v. Rocky, very different parts of the party, very different, bases of support. Colonel Pam clearly, well known in Louisville, Rocky well known in Eastern Kentucky, but has certainly, gotten some attention statewide because he's been he ran statewide. He ran against Governor Beshear in that first primary for the governor's race. He and Adam Edelin, and I think he came in second. Somebody had some ideas about that. Maybe Ryan. I don't know. But yeah, so he's run statewide before. Colonel Pam's run statewide before. Could be an interesting race for sure. I'm not picking favorites. My favorite is more democracy is better. I like to see more races. I like to see more candidates. I don't think there's this kind of finite, there's only so much Democratic attention. We shouldn't have contested primaries. No, we should have all our primaries should be contested, I think. People probably don't like that because they'd rather save their time and energy for the general. But I think you got to build some momentum, build some attention, and contested primaries help make that happen. I don't know. Chris or Kim, what do you guys think about this, kind of how these races are shaping up? Or about how Trump is trying to get rid of Thomas Massie. Could that help us out? Maybe. I don't know.
I'll go. I don't think that it's going to help us out because from what I was reading, Trump really wants Massie to be primaried. And the only thing that's going to happen is that he's going to try to put one of his picks in there.
Yeah.
And that is a Republican stronghold right there, as we see it right now. However, when the time comes, maybe Trump will continuously do what he's doing and allow Elon Musk to run the country. And then no matter who you are, you'll say, hey, we need something different than what Trump is putting out there. I just feel like as far as these races are concerned, it's so early to really say. I think there's going to be some surprises of other people coming aboard as we get closer to the date of when you have to be registered. I've been hearing some things out here in these Kentucky streets about a few people that I won't mention right now.
Oh, come on.
Oh, you pulling my arm. Quick. Okay, I'll tell you one.
Oh. We're making news, people.
This is just what I've been hearing. Now, we already know Andy's going to run in 2028. We know that, right? Can you all tell that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay. And you all know that he was down there at Bloody Sunday, right?
I saw that. Yeah, that he went down.
Yeah, you saw that. Yeah, why is he down there, right? Okay, we know
only one
what's
reason
going on. And Andy needs to put a little rinse in his hair because he's looking like he's already the president. You know how gray they get real quick. But anyway, he's still my boy, though. He can still come to the cookout and he can stay. So one of the names that's being really floated around, they've already said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going to think about it. Don't even come to me. But there are some grumblings of some pressure being put on our own lieutenant governor, perhaps.
For Senate race?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought she was teeing up to run for governor. That's kind of where I felt like that was where she was headed. But who knows? Senate races first, right? And
yeah,
I don't know.
We may have somebody else. A lot of these things are coming actually from the DNC and Chuck Schumer. I really want people to understand that they do have their fingertips on Kentucky. I don't want anybody out there to think that our lawmakers in Washington, besides, Morgan McGarvey, has forgotten about us. There are other lawmakers on the Hill that are concerned most definitely about Kentucky, and they want to make sure that they put a candidate in that can run and actually win.
The actually win is the hard part. I think Progress Kentucky has not done our work yet. This is not a purple state, I think, but we got some time, and there's a lot of horrible things happening at the federal level that might encourage people to ask some tough questions. I don't know. Chris, what do you're making a face.
Because I'm trying to remember who's the Kentucky Wildcats sports broadcaster that was thinking about running.
Matt
something.
Matt Jones. Matt Jones.
Yeah, maybe he'll throw his hat in the ring for that Senate race too. Because I read his book. I think it was his book.
Please.
Or something that he put out where he was talking about how running for House of Representatives wasn't worth his time, and so he'd do Senate or nothing.
Yeah, that's what we want in office, right? Yeah, okay.
Somebody who thinks being in the House of Representatives isn't worthy of them. It's definitely the attitude that's going to get you to higher office, sir. I know he's like kind of a blowhard, and he wrote a book, but then didn't really run the race. Like what? I didn't see the point really.
Yeah.
But who I like in the basketball world, Rex Chapman. If we're talking about idle speculation about people that have zero interest probably in doing it, but I do think it's a hard race to win statewide. I do think Elon Musk and the government of buying for billionaires, that's what Republicans stand for now, is making sure billionaires get ahead, further ahead, right? Lap the universe. That's not appealing.
I do have to say, the MAGAs that I know are still drinking the Kool-Aid. And I've only seen stuff online about some of the people who voted for Trump who were on the fence, not quite MAGA, but did it because whatever reason that they had. Common one is economy, whatever, and that they're regretting their vote now. But yeah, the MAGA hardcore are still drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Give it another month. Give it one more month. The man's only been in office for 6.5 weeks, and it feels like 6 years. And he's starting to touch so many people. So you just wait. Give it another month. It's going to touch everybody.
I had that hope too. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was like, man, don't you remember COVID? People were literally dying of a virus, and then they were still denying it. And so I'm like, true.
Yeah, I think there's an unshakable core for that guy. I think there's a lot of, but those were not the people that decided the election, and they do not decide elections, right? So it's the folks on the, as you say, the kind of fringe people who are maybe I will, maybe I won't, but economy, and now the economy's in the toilet, and the market's in the toilet, and if you have a 401k and you're hoping to retire soon, and yet they still are also calling Social Security the greatest Ponzi scheme ever, and they need to get rid of it. So let's see how that all plays out. Also, make sure to listen to our interview with Jason Bailey. I chat with Jason Bailey about what these cuts mean to Kentucky, and I don't think they're going to be popular. They are not going to be popular cuts. All right, so we've gone super long on this one. I want to point out that the article that I pulled from the Herald Leader, which talks about Rocky maybe running, there's a good, he does not reject the idea, right? So Atkins himself said in a statement that he's received a lot of calls and encouragement to run for the Senate. His spokesperson, Emily Ferguson, if folks remember, she lost a House race a few years back. He's humbled and honored by all the support and enthusiasm from across the Commonwealth, said Emily Ferguson, and that he has not made a decision to run for any office as of yet. If you keep scrolling down in this article, they eventually come around to, after talking about how awesome Rocky would be, at the very end, they talk about the fact that Amy ran against McConnell, and McGrath, who created a still active political action committee after her loss, told the Herald leader she hadn't made up her mind about a run yet. It's way too early right now, McGrath said. I'm doing what I can, helping other candidates right now, and I'm focused on that. Which I just like. She is like so fallen out of the political conversation that it's like literally the last sentence in this very long article is the fact that she hasn't actually said, no, I won't run, which is interesting. Anyway. All right. So we're going to get on to the next story because I think we need to. So Chris, you're teed up. So talk to us about what's going on in Frankfurt.
Yeah. So I want to give a little bit of background. Like I'm a high school chemistry teacher, and I've also worked in the water treatment industry also. So this this current bill in the House, SB 89, is quite concerning. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from this Kentucky Lantern. This is a quote. The bill threatens the water quality of many rivers, streams, and tributaries, and as a result would significantly compromise Kentucky's groundwater, impacting the water quality of more than 31,000 private use wells, at least 156 public water and 156 public water systems. And that's by Secretary Rebecca Goodman. And then, so one of the oppositions to this, or one of the people in favor of this, Madden, speaking before a House committee next to a lawyer representing the Kentucky Coal Association, so you know where their allegiances lie, reiterated that his reasoning for SB 89, arguing that industries from farming to manufacturing to coal mining would benefit from a limited definition of what waters the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet can regulate. So, you know, essentially this comes down to industries wanting to pollute our water. As a kid, I grew up in Martin County, which is coal country. And, you know, my grandparents had a well and used it for many years. And as the mines got closer to our house, our well water became unusable. So, you know, we couldn't exactly link it directly to the coal companies, but you know, in legal terms, but I don't see how it was otherwise. Like, it was fine for decades, and then all of a sudden, when the mines come by our house and start blasting, they were doing more mountaintop removal at that point. That it started to fill more with some arsenic and bacteria issues, and so, you know, if Kentucky allows the regulations to become more narrow and let them pollute more, then more people are going to have to be dependent on, you know, on a system by their county, or maybe they have to go just buy bottled water because they can't use their well anymore. And even some reservoirs are going to be affected by this. So those counties would have to step up treatment. So, like, don't pollute yourself. Like, they're trying to let these companies pollute the water and then poison us. And you don't want that. You don't want to be poisoned. So, you know, call in, and tell them not to pass SB 89. Like, you want to be able to drink good water. What do y'all think about this? Aaron, you're muted.
Yeah, SB 89 is a huge problem. It is, you know, them going way out of the mainstream, doing something that no other state's done in terms of limiting water quality protections. And, your, I think, really powerful story, firsthand experience with, the fact that coal companies do pollute waterways and how important it is that these protections exist. It's just outrageous that these guys are doing exactly this GOP, like supermajority in Frankfurt. What does that mean? It means they carry the water or pollute the water, for the coal industry, like bar none. Like that's what we get with that type of leadership. And I watched some of the House Natural Resources Committee conversation about it. Super informed people, very concerned about what they were doing, and the legislature just couldn't care less. There was like an amendment made it a little bit worse, but still, a real problem in terms of being able to have the tools to protect our water, which is so important for so many Kentuckians, and they just, wouldn't do the right thing. So it passed the House on, I think, pretty much a party line vote, made it through the House committee on a party line vote. Kudos to Erica Hancock and Adam Moore voting against it. So really appreciate their leadership in that space. But just the sheer numbers, like the GOP gets to impose its will on our environmental protections, and their will is horrible. And it was definitely just disappointing to see it all played out. It's already passed the Senate. It's a Senate bill, started there, passed the Senate. It was amended in the House, so it passed the House. Now they'll need to reconcile those two. So, but they've got plenty of time to do it. They've got another couple days of session, and then they do their veto break. Hopefully the governor will veto it. Hopefully we'll continue to be able to build some opposition to it so it doesn't actually end up being passed. But there's a lot of momentum on it right now, and it's going to take, a lot of public pressure to get the GOP supermajority to kind of walk away. So I don't know. That's my very, very pissed off take on this stupid, horrible bill. Well, they've got a lot of bad bills, but this is a real bad one.
I'm going to say what I've said for years, and you all know what I always say. They want us sick, dumb, and poor. And every year it just happens to be exactly what I say, because the writing is on the wall. If they cared anything about our health, really, if they did, this would not have passed. This wouldn't be going on. This wouldn't be a concern. On the federal level, taking us out of the Paris Agreement Accord, it just shows you, and there's conspiracy theories, but I'm starting to almost think, is Elon Musk keep putting those rockets up there in space because they're building something for themselves and they don't give a damn about us?
Yeah.
Because they're not like us. Okay.
Well, there is no planet B, but apparently there is Mars, and some people think that's better than like protecting what we've got here. Yeah, sure. That makes sense. That makes no sense.
If we could terraform Mars, then we can make Earth right.
Oh, you're not going to be able to make it, nor am I. I mean, they're going to probably charge like $500 million to go up there or something. I can't even gather that much money up in my diversified portfolio. I can't even do it. But
no, not even
you know what?
Not even you can do that. That's amazing.
I can try, but you know what? They want us dumb, sick, and poor, right? I was reading about pregnant ladies that are being, their employment being terminated with the federal government, and they don't have insurance, they don't have a job, and they're pregnant. Who cares? I just read also what they're trying to do as well is they're trying to pass a bill to take food away from our most hungry children. That may be the only meal that they get. And right here in Kentucky, it will influence 631 schools and almost 361,000 students in this state alone. So that just goes to show you, they don't care about us. No. Wasn't that a Michael Jackson song? He said it best. They don't care about us. They don't care about us.
I don't know that one. I will say this. I want to give the update. If people tuned in expecting to hear from Senator Reggie Thomas, you will be disappointed because the Senate state is still in session. So the senator can't just leave the Senate. Apparently, he thinks it's more important to do his job than it is to come on this show. I'm outraged, but I do understand it. All
I'm
right,
happy
so
that he's not here because he's taking care of business like the rest of them should. I'm fed up, Aaron and Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, I am fed up. I've had it up to here with these people.
yeah,
agreed.
no, for sure. All right. Well, don't fret though, because we do have a wonderful interview for you. Which, the legislature. I want to say this right now. The legislature, they're in session. They've got another couple days. Then they're going to go out for their veto break, and then they'll come back and overturn all the vetoes that the governor imposes on their horrible bills. And so this is one that, it's really important people stay engaged. I think some of the worst bills, you get that veto break and you get a chance to ramp up the pressure on some of the worst bills. So I truly believe you should absolutely get engaged there. Follow what we're doing. So we have a legislative kind of alert that we have. It's a Google Doc, but we update it every day during the session. Big kudos to Josh Buckman, our legislative committee chair, who does the yeoman's work on that, along with helping to wrangle the committee that's watching all these different bills. So please do keep an eye on that. There's a bit.ly link that Annabelle can put in this chat. You can look at it every day and know where you should be making your phone calls on. We've said it a number of times. They're just the nicest people. If you make those phone calls to the legislative comment line, they're going to be super nice. And they're going to walk you through the process. And you can just read off the list of bills that we're opposing and the list of bills that we're supporting, and they will send the message to your lawmakers or the entire legislature or the entire Senate or the entire House, however you want to break it down. But it's absolutely worth your time. Please do engage that way and keep an eye on it the next few days. And then over the recess, maybe we'll pick a few key bills to try to ramp up the pressure on. So any other has everyone made a call this session? Has everyone called in the legislative comment line?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they're nice. Aren't they nice?
I have.
They're varying degrees of competent. I will say this, but it's they're always very sweet about it, for sure. And they'll eventually figure it out. And sometimes I do not know how they think I should spell my name, but they get it awfully wrong as they're trying to look me up. Now, was that VIARX? I'm like, what? No, that was not. Anyway,
they're certainly better than Andy Barr's henchmen who answer his phones, who try to defend Elon Musk when I called in to be like, stop Elon.
You got to make your calls because you got to learn about the staff. And apparently Mitch McConnell has no staff because you can never get anyone in his office to pick up the phone. So I don't know what they're doing, but anyway. All right, let's go ahead and check in with Jason Bailey again, Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. This is his, third time on the show. Always brings the facts, always brings the information you need. So please do pay attention to this one. We'll get Senator Reggie Thomas back on the show another time, perhaps during the veto break, to talk about what we should really be keeping our eyes set on in terms of legislation we potentially could stop. Really just excited to have back on the show Jason Bailey, who heads up the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, really the kind of go-to organization to make some sense of what's happening in all these funding conversations that we're having right now. We're hearing a lot about federal engagement and federal decisions, whether it's the kind of chaos of DOGE and freezing things and cutting things, and maybe it's billions and maybe it's millions. It doesn't seem like it's been terribly fact-checked what they're actually doing, or don't seem to have a much of a plan to do it. But I do know there's also the conversation about what's happening with the big federal spending packages. And they've, kind of taking the first step, putting some parameters in for spending that Congress is going to need to sort through. And it looks like it could have some very significant impact. So we didn't, the best person to have on to help us sort this out really is Jason Bailey. So thanks so much for coming back on the show. And yeah, what do people need to know about that conversation that's happening in Washington, D.C. With very big ramifications for Kentucky?
Yeah, I mean, a lot's at stake right now, and it is. You're right. It's sort of going along a couple of tracks, but I will speak first to Congress, and the House has now passed a budget resolution that kind of lays out the parameters of what they want to spend in certain areas. They'll have to come in later and fill in the details of that. But what they have at this point is very concerning. In particular, they've assigned Congressman Brett Guthrie from the 2nd District as the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and has been assigned with cutting $880 billion over the next 10 years out of his committee. Now, when it comes to what could be cut from that, there aren't many options. And the biggest one is Medicaid. And, Congressman Guthrie himself has 30.7% of his constituents receive Medicaid. And that's not the highest percentage in Kentucky. So he is sort of charged with a level of cuts that's impossible to have happen without shifting enormous costs to the states or kicking a huge number, many millions of Americans off of healthcare, or cutting providers to where they won't accept Medicaid, and many of them don't already. So that's a really huge one. Basically, the way that they've set out this budget resolution, it will require them to make substantial cuts to make possible the extension of the 2017 tax cuts, which go overwhelmingly to the wealthiest people. Even in that case, though, they will grow the deficit, even with the level of cuts to the budget that they're talking about. So it's a hugely expensive proposition, and it's essentially a shift in resources away from everyday people, whether you receive Medicaid or receive SNAP food assistance or receive any of a number of other public services like education, student loans, that is at risk in the budget, and give them to the wealthiest people. The top 1% who overwhelmingly are the winners in the extension of the 2017 tax cuts.
And so you mentioned Brett Guthrie. He's the chair of one of the most important committees in Congress. He's kind of a low-profile guy. We don't talk about him that much in Central Kentucky, but he's elevated himself to be in this position where he's he's going to be the guy who pulls together the recommendations from his committee, which is going to, as you say, there's really no way they can get the cuts they've just agreed to without significant cuts to Medicaid, which as much as nearly a third of his constituents rely on. You said that's not the highest. I think Hal Rogers maybe his district, another longtime GOP representative that has even more, a higher percentage of his constituents that rely on this Medicaid for healthcare.
Right. I mean, it's 44% of the residents in Hal Rogers district. And Medicaid, it's about 1 in 3 Kentuckians. We're talking about seniors in nursing homes, people with disabilities, children. About half of the state's kids are covered by Medicaid or CHIP, which is part of Medicaid. And low-income workers whose employers don't provide health care. So, we're talking about a ton of people, but it's also about, it is sort of the cornerstone of the healthcare payment system, especially in rural Kentucky, so that if you make the kind of cuts that they're talking about, we will have hospitals close. We will have doctors' offices close. And so that we will have health insurance. Those who have private health insurance will have to pay a whole lot more when they go to the doctor to cover at least a portion of the uninsured that are going to be created in this bill. So everybody's going to pay more, and everybody's going to have less access to health care if the kind of cuts in Medicaid they're talking about. And if they shift costs over to the state, just say we're going to pay less and the state has to pick it up, well, then they're going to have to cut funding for infrastructure. They're going to have to cut funding for education, for higher education, for human services, for environmental protection, or any number of other things to even make that possible. It won't be possible to cut that much in those other things, but that's the only way they could try, or raise taxes substantially, which I don't believe they're going to do. So it's really a huge problem when you talk about Medicaid. And everything we've said about Medicaid, you can also say about SNAP food assistance, which covers nearly 600,000 people. And again, it's what keeps grocery stores running in rural areas. It's what it's the only thing between us and real serious hunger problems. We already have hunger problems, but even more serious hunger problems for children, for seniors, for the most vulnerable Kentuckians. And it's also a program that they're looking to cut, that they would shift costs to the state or just kick people off the program directly, increasing hardship. And again, a lot of these people are workers, or they're seniors, they're people who've retired, or they're kids who have no say in this matter. So it's very concerning, the level of cuts they're talking about. And again, there's no reason to do that. And those who say that, and I've heard people say that this is about our top passing off debts to our children and grandchildren. I think I heard Representative Barr say that recently. This bill increases the deficit. It doesn't, it increases the deficit because of the tax cuts are so much bigger than the budget reduction. So that is just a false statement. It is going to increase costs for the future and hurt people today, only to give more to the wealthy.
And then, so you mentioned that SNAP is kind of in the sights right now, along with, is that the same committee that Brett Guthrie oversees? It's a different committee.
It's a different committee. It's a different committee, but they've assigned it with over $200 billion in tax cuts to that body of options, and SNAP is really the only one that is likely to be cut.
And then, so that means, other things that rural communities should be concerned about in terms of the budget conversation that's happening right now. I know that there's been a talk of an executive order to get rid of the Department of Education. That I think Department of Education has a real role to play in a lot of rural communities. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very concerning just to hear about potential cuts to the Federal Department of Education. It's in Project 2025 to phase out what's called Title I, which about 70 to 80% of Kentucky schools are Title I schools, meaning they have a lot of low-income kids, and they receive a lot of money from that. It's actually in there to phase that out over 10 years. So we don't know exactly what dismantling the Department of Education means, but it certainly puts at risk all those funding streams. Again, that money goes to low-income kids. It goes to kids with disabilities to serve them in special education. It goes for teacher training. It goes for things like art and music programs, technical education, and then there's a stream that goes through the Department of Agriculture that's for school meals, that helps subsidize everybody who has school meals. Many students now have free school meals, but even those who pay, the federal money is helping subsidize and make it cheaper than it would otherwise be. So there's a lot at risk in terms of education. And again, that's 90% of Kentucky schools, kids are attending our public schools. It's even higher in the rural areas. So it's a direct shot to what's really a cornerstone of many communities in Kentucky.
Yep. So it's about, I think, generally about 10% of education funding comes from the federal government, but for these specific types of programs that some of these low income schools really do rely on, that's a really important part of their funding. It seems like the federal, this kind of anti-federal, just kind of reflexive nature of the Republican Party, they're now the dog that's caught the car, right? They've talked so much about, federal spending and how problematic it is. Now they have a chance to do it. And it looks like there's going to be just significant public impacts to, what they're trying to do. Are there other things you've seen so far in the DOGE efforts to fund the funding freezes out of the initial EOs, things that are, really costing folks here in Kentucky?
Yeah. That's the other avenue in which cuts are being made is just unilaterally through DOGE or through executive orders by the executive branch, spending less, what's called impoundment, which means spending less than was appropriated. That's not how the law works or how the power of the purse works, but we'll see what the courts say about that. But we're already seeing in particular the layoff of federal employees in Kentucky. And there are 23,000 federal employees in Kentucky. There are more federal employees than there are people who work at Amazon, Ford, or UPS. And so it's a big employer. It's not something many people think about, but it's a major employer. It's actually a bigger share of the employment in rural areas than it is in our cities. 93% of federal employees do not work in Washington, D.C. They work out throughout the country, and they do a lot of really important functions. Here in Kentucky, 6,000 of those 23,000 work in Veterans Affairs. So they're providing health care for veterans at one of 14 healthcare veterans clinics or hospitals. We also have, state national park employees who've been laid off at Mammoth Cave, Forest Service employees who've been laid off. We've had people who work for the FDIC, the bank examiners who protect your money in the bank, who've been laid off. People who do lots of things that we don't think about. The National Weather Service, that is the folks who generate the data that goes into the weather forecasts you watch on the news. That's generated by the federal government, who has the satellites and technology, and the experts who generate the data. We have 3 offices: Jackson, Paducah, and Louisville. They're staffed with meteorologists who do that, and these are the folks that are being laid off. So it's really frightening if you think about these services. We have about 700 Social Security office employees who help people process benefits, get their benefits, make changes when people pass away, and so forth. I mean, there's also been reductions there. It's really concerning that these people whose role it is to process these important programs, if they're not able to do it, if you can't get to the phone with somebody, to get something that you need, to get a payment, if you're a farmer, or access a loan, access a small business loan from the Small Business Administration, everything slows down. And, the last thing I'll say about the federal employees is it's just an important employment avenue for people. About 30% of federal employees in Kentucky are veterans. And about 26% of federal employees have a disability. Many of those people are disabled veterans. Workers of color are twice as prevalent in the federal government than they are in employment more generally in Kentucky. So these are opportunities that have been available to people who may have fewer other opportunities otherwise to provide these important public services, and to see them cut just sort of willy-nilly, and cutting probationary employees. Well, the probationary employees are not always new, and they're also the senior employees of tomorrow, right? I mean, you have to have a pipeline in any profession of new people coming in that learn the trade, learn the skill over time, and become the supervisors and the people who lead it later. And those are folks who are just being arbitrarily eliminated, again, with no good reason. I mean, these costs are a very small part of the federal budget. They're not going to make a difference in the deficit. And again, they're part of an overall plan that's actually going to grow the deficit because of the size of the tax cuts under consideration.
Yeah, it's a little astounding to watch. I don't know that anyone specifically voted for this type of kind of chaos and confusion. The fact that they're firing people that they then realize they actually need to run the agency, but can't really get a hold of them because they, didn't have enough foresight to, even have an exit interview. So it really does seem like it's not well thought out whatsoever. And we're going to be the folks kind of left holding the bag, the folks who actually do rely on, the government to function, right? It's, billionaires probably don't need as much government functionality, but I suppose the general normal folks do, that folks who rely on those VA clinics, that we're seeing this erosion of their workforce, that, 19 federal offices that they had targeted for closure potentially, a number of those, I think, mine safety offices, which, the legacy in Kentucky, it seems like that's the opposite of what we want to be doing, is gutting those and closing down those mine safety offices. I don't know. It does seem a little overwhelming right now. Jason, how are you kind of keeping your eye on the ball? It seems like there's a lot coming at the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. How are you guys figuring out how to prioritize your time and energy?
Well, I think there's a little triage, and there's a little like what's next, sort of dealing with things as they come. I think both the congressional threats as well as the executive actions are equally concerning, and so we're trying to pay attention to both. I think there's already a sense, though, to which a lot of this stuff is not popular. I don't think they're winning the battle of public opinion about these ideas. I think when you ask people if they want smaller government, they'll say yes. When you ask them specific things, like, do you want to cut veteran services, they say no. So this is where the rubber's hitting the road, in the sense of like these things are having to turn into reality. And so far, it's not popular. And so our role in this, I see, is trying to make it as clear as possible for Kentuckians to understand what's actually happening with these decisions and what they could mean. And so, that changes from week to week, but we're trying our best to keep up.
And then we haven't even touched on Frankfurt. So I know they did go ahead and they kind of went forward and ratcheted down the amount of taxes that we're paying at the state level. Right? There's this kind of they'd like to get to zero in terms of income tax, and making sure that conditions are met. They're able to take it down a 0.5% each session, I suppose. What's your assessment of what they've done so far and what impact that's going to have?
Well, it's a third half-point cut of the past few years. And so that totals over $2 billion a year annually in lost revenue once it's fully implemented. We only have a $16 billion budget. So when that comes due, you're talking about more than 10% of the budget that won't be there. And no one has identified how we're going to pay for that. The legislature here in the final week is looking at some changes to that trigger mechanism for the tax cuts to make it even easier in the future to make smaller cuts, even if their own thresholds aren't met, even if there's no surplus of revenues above expenditures, they could still cut, give themselves permission to cut. So this seems to be the number one goal of the legislature, to cut the income tax, no matter the consequences. And what we've been saying, traditionally, it's the largest revenue source. It's also the case when you cut it in the way that they are, where it's this across the board cut. The cut goes overwhelmingly to the wealthy, to the top 20%, especially the top 1%. For everyday people, it's just it won't make much of a difference in their lives. But in the budget, it will make a big difference in our ability to fund schools, to fund healthcare. And if the federal government follows through with these cuts, then it's just going to shift more demand on the state to do more, not less. But with these tax cuts, we're going to have less capacity to deal with whatever is being handed to us. I will also say that a lot of the federal action right now around the budget, as well as the tariffs, is creating a lot of financial turmoil and uncertainty in the markets and in the economy more broadly. And there's rising concern about the potential for a recession or slowdown. I have no crystal ball as to whether that will happen, but it's a lot more likely than it was 30 days ago. And if that was to happen, obviously there'd be more hardship, more unemployment, more need, and there would be less revenue at the state level to deal with that. So it would make the problem we're talking about going into the next year much worse.
And it does seem like those tariffs, very much have a cost for Kentucky. Bourbon seems like one that, already Canada has, pulled it from some of their shelves. Not maybe all of Canada, but some of Canada. That's going to hurt an industry that is really important to us. Other things that, Kentucky is specifically vulnerable for in terms of that trade conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we're the 5th largest state in terms of exports as a share of our GDP, and we're the 6th largest states in terms of imports. So if you look at the automobile industry, if you look at the aerospace industry, which we're actually pretty big in, not as well known, but we produce a lot of airplanes and airplane parts. Some of that is produced, different pieces are produced in other countries and then brought in or sold to other countries. Canada is our biggest exporting country. So if there are retaliatory tariffs, which are already being put in place, or if prices go up for things, then that will reduce the sale of those Kentucky products, which reduces the revenue coming into Kentucky. And then, of course, the other side of the issue is the things that everyday people buy. As those become more expensive, the food you buy, the automobile, the price of gas is potentially, which a lot comes from Canada, other things. Then it puts an additional pinch on family budgets, and we know that's already been a problem the last few years with the price of eggs, the price of clothes, the price of computers, sort of anything that has been affected by insurance, that's been affected by both the pandemic, natural disasters, and other issues that have come up in the last few years.
You mentioned autos, and Kentucky is actually manufactures more autos per capita than any other state. Very important employer. You mentioned earlier Ford. Also, and the governor's been very proud of this. They've landed a lot of huge investments in terms of building an EV manufacturing supply chain, a lot of battery manufacturing that's kind of expected to take place here. There's a lot of investments that are happening, and I know that the Congress is looking at getting rid of all the IRA tax credits. Those have played a very significant role. I think Ford's been pretty clear in their SEC filings that if these IRA tax credits go away, their entire investment strategy is kind of questionable in terms of what's going to happen to them. So, it seems like that's a big one. Anything you would point out in that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. The transition to electric vehicles depends on public policy, investments and subsidies. It's not necessarily going to happen from consumer demand alone. We know that. That's why a lot of those things were enacted. And I think the Trump administration has been pretty clear about that's not the direction they want to go in, and they want to push fossil fuels instead. So, these are projects that are underway or under construction that will go forward only if they believe the market will be there for those products. So if you look, for example, with electric vehicles, there's a $7,500 tax credit for the purchase of EVs that I believe are domestically produced. If that goes away, it's going to be less economical to be able to purchase those vehicles. Will they produce as many? Will they build the second battery plant in Hardin County, which has already been delayed? I don't know, but I think that all those considerations are dependent upon a favorable environment for the transition to electric vehicles, and part of that also is going to depend on a favorable economy, where people can buy new stuff. And that again is also at risk at this moment.
Yeah, I know they've talked about the tariffs hitting autos very hard because it is one of the most kind of integrated North American supply chains possible, with some vehicle parts going across the border like as many as 8 times as they get to that final assembly. And Ford obviously is in the middle of that. But it really is important that folks understand that these are thousands of jobs that have been announced in creating that in getting that battery factory up and running would mean thousands of jobs, good paying jobs. That's actually Brett Guthrie's district, I believe. So they'll all have a hand in whether these policies continue and what the impact is on our economy. But an EV is a bit more expensive. That's the point of these tax credits, which it's a battery tax credit and a Okay, I guess we had a little bit of that cut off. I think, sorry about that. That interview went a little bit longer, so, but we did get to the most of it, the meat of it, until we lost our producer. So we'll wrap it up here. Kimberly, are you around? Do you want to close us out? All right, we might have lost Kimberly as well. All right, we do have a call to action that I would encourage everyone to take a listen to. Chris, you want to do the call to action?
Let me get to the. All right, call to action. The General Assembly is moving, and we're watching. We've got our bad bill checker underway right now, as well as a list of good bills to watch. Find our list of good bills on the bit.ly link. So we've got SB 75 would lower the age to carry concealed from 21 to 18. This bill was passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Call your legislators and let them know to oppose SB 75. We've got HB 196. This would weaken coal miners' safety. This bill would pass. This bill has passed the House and is in the Senate Economic, Tourism, and Labor Committee. Please contact members of the Senate Economic, Tourism, and Labor Committee and your senator and tell them to oppose HB 196. Now, some good bills. HB 684 allows caregivers the ability to utilize absentee voting. This bill has passed the House. contact your legislators and let them know, to tell them to support HB 684. And HB 236 capped the price of EpiPens at $100 and make them covered under Medicaid and K-CHIP. Passed the House. Please contact your legislators and ask them to support HB 236. And I believe Adam Moore was one of the big people pushing that bill. So kudos to him. Call the legislative committee line tomorrow when they open, Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And that number is 1-800-372-7187. Phones open at 7 a.m.
Woohoo! Make your calls happen, people. And one other call to action that I'll throw in there, because I think it's a really important one. We're going to be outside of the Lexington Chamber of Commerce, their policy luncheon that is going to be happening next Wednesday morning. I think 10 a.m. till 11:30. We'll be out there calling on Andy Barr to make a decision, right? The decision is, whose side are you on? Is it Trump or Musk or us? So really encouraging folks to show up, come on out, have a great time, meet other pissed off activists, and do what you can to make a difference at our federal level. So, Kimberly, are you there? Are you back?
I sure am. Did you call upon me earlier?
A little bit. That's fine. We had some snafus. So yeah, if you wanted to close us out, that would be phenomenal.
Yes, sir. I sure can. Tonight was just an absolutely wonderful show. I learned so much with that interview that you did. It was amazing. All the nuggets of information that was given to us, and we need more of those, right?
Absolutely.
But the disclaimer first, always, Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, known as CAVE. And we are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is always to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Please join us for our next show, which will be show 202.
Ooh.
Wow, 202 next week. And we will be joined by someone that will be so amazing and great. And also, production of this episode was by our very own beautiful Annabelle Nagel, and then Nate Orshan. He wrote and performed our theme song, and you can find more information and music at natosongs.com, and that's NATO songs.com. Head over there to listen to some of his new music. And if you miss the weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, our audio podcast and our show notes are always available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and just about wherever you get your podcast. And when you do listen to us on the pod, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you may be listening. Some logo and graphic content was provided by Couchfire Media. And everybody, we will see you at the same time next week.